Let's get started with reporting for numbers. This is part 2, an overview of how journalists use numbers in stories. So we're not talking math like this. Math can be a little daunting, but this math is crazy. I'm talking about really common sense, common math, things that you care about, like the cost of college increasing more than 25% in the last 10 years. These stories are really popular with readers and they're important because they add context. But look at all the numbers just in the lead. I mean, aside from the years 78 and 79, we have $17,680, $8,250 per year in public colleges, 2008 to 2009, 38,720. So lots and lots of numbers. It can be hard to see those numbers when we're reading them. So journalists often like to use graphics or visuals to make things simpler so we can see the numbers. This is what we'll be asking you to do. So here's another graphic that goes with that story. And this is interesting because it puts all of the states in rank for the highest percentage increase. So be grateful that you weren't in Louisiana, where college tuition has gone up more than 100% in the past 10 years. But the numbers in Texas are still high, 30% increase. So what could we do with those numbers? How could we put that in context? We could think about how much has tuition increased at Texas State in the past 10 years. And we'd have to do a little math to figure that out. So journalism is really a lot about numbers, numbers to count things and dollar amounts. So whether we're doing stories on budget or health or sports or business or entertainment, just think it's about ratings in entertainment and the cost of entertainment, fashion, politics, weather, criminal justice, education. Everything has got numbers in it. And numbers really help us make sense of stories. So the pandemic and the number of coronavirus infections, so many numbers in these stories that it can be hard to keep track of. The US tops 3 million known infections as coronavirus surges. If you were in Arizona, you'd be reading stories like this. Arizona has the highest percentage of positive COVID-19 tests in the US. Here's what it means. That last part, here's what it means, is what we do as journalists. We bring credibility to the numbers. So we interpret the numbers and we help make them comprehensible for our readers. So we'll take a look at this lead on this Arizona story. 1 in 4 COVID-19 tests in Arizona is coming back positive, the highest percentage in the country according to Johns Hopkins University, and an indicator that there isn't enough testing to keep up with the new coronavirus spread in the state. Arizona's COVID-19 metrics have been moving in the wrong direction for more than a month. So this story has numbers behind it, and they will be later in the story, but we talk in the lead and in the top of the story, we help people understand why these numbers matter, and we put it in perspective in a way we can understand. Here's another story from NPR. Effective anti-racist education requires more diverse teachers, more training. This is a really important story. So how can we put this story, the need for more diverse teachers, how can we put that in context? How can we localize that story? What does Texas State have to do with that? What does this area of the country have to do with that? You may know Texas State started as a teacher's college. So we have a big curriculum and instruction area, so a big college of education. We have almost 2,000 new teacher undergrads every year, right? So 2,000 curriculum and instruction undergrads. We could look at what is the ethnic makeup and the gender makeup of those students. We can get those numbers and we can make sense of it for our audience. The other thing we do is we verify numbers. This is really important because you will get numbers from so many different sources. So Lloyd Doggett is a U.S. representative who represents Hays and Travis counties. So he tweeted this. Lloyd Doggett says, Hays County in Central Texas has seen an incredible 845% increase in COVID-19 cases since June 7th. That is a big number. Well, PolitiFact is a media organization that spends all of its time verifying numbers. And you may have seen some of their rankings. They have Pantsifier, one of my favorite. But in this case, they investigated this and they found that Doggett was mostly true. Now, this might surprise you. He was mostly true, so we often might think, oh, he a little overestimated it. In fact, he underestimated it. But Doggett's remarks on Twitter was missing a detail. There were indeed 845% increase in the 14-day average, but the actual number of cases was much higher. So Hays County experienced roughly a 1,569% increase in the 7-day average, which is apparently how we generally look at these things. 1,500% increase. That's daunting. Here's another story. This is a poll, right? So one of the ways we look at and we gauge all manner of public opinion is looking at polls. The Pew Research Center did a poll on women's right to vote. So after a century after women gained the right to vote, the majority of Americans see work to do in gender equity. Right? So this gender equity public opinion poll polled men and women, Republicans and Democrats. We break it down in all different kinds of ways to tell you what the public opinion on this is. And the subhead here, about 3 in 10 men say women's gains have come at the expense of men. So this is interesting. These numbers are very interesting in this poll, but as a journalist, what we would do before we report on it is we would look at the poll. We would explain how it was conducted and consider whether or not it was an accurate poll by standards. When we use numbers in stories, we often refer to it as data. And so we take the numbers or the data, we filter them, we look at them and put them in context, and then we often visualize them, put them in a graphic so we can see what they look like, and our audience can see what they look like. But the most important thing is the story. Numbers need stories, right? Numbers in themselves are not stories. And stories often need numbers to add context to what this story means. So the Washington Post did a big series on opioids. So there's no peace, the toll of opioids. And I'll post this link so that you can read this and watch this if you'd like. One of the elements of this was a visualization, a map of the U.S. And this story was the result of a DEA database that was released by court order in a lawsuit against drug companies. The interesting thing is that the DEA had this database, and both the DEA and the drug companies were fighting the release, fighting to keep this information private or secret. So the Washington Post and the Post organization, which owns newspapers in West Virginia, where there's quite a bit of opioid abuse, fought a year-long battle to get these numbers and make them public. So look at this map. The number of pills distributed per person per year in the U.S., by county, right? Broken down by county over these years. So this map, the colors on this map, represent the number of pills per person distributed in any individual county in the U.S. So look at some of these dark areas, more than 150 pills per individual person in that county. And even in Texas, we've got some high counties. Even these areas where we're talking less than 75 pills, we're still talking about per person in the counties. So we add context in that way. We add context in this way as well. This is a college award. The Hearst competition is for college journalists, and this story won a first place award. And it's why female athletes are some of the best students on campus. Now, we might just say that. You might have a coach say that. You might have a professor say that. But we need numbers if we're actually going to say it and report it with any credibility. The NCAA, for the most recent group studied, students who started in 2010 and are tracked over a 6-year period. So this data shows female student athletes had a reported graduation rate of 75%, 14 percentage points greater than the male student rate. The graduation rate for the entire female student body for that same cohort was 68%. So the graduation rate of female athletes was higher, and we have the math to show that when we looked at the data. And then we tell the story of how that is and perhaps why that is. Here's another set of numbers. The Chronicle of Higher Education took a look at executive compensation for public and private universities. That basically means how much are the administrators getting paid, the presidents of the universities, the chancellors. This is a national list of public and private, the top paid administrators, but we could take this down to the local level. And so what story could we write? How could we add context to this? This is Brian McCall, the chancellor of the Texas State University system. So he makes over $1 million. And we've got the UT chancellor for the entire UT system. He doesn't quite make $1 million. These are some interesting numbers, and we can ask a lot of questions about why they are, especially in this current economic environment. But we need these numbers, and we need to be sure of them to really tell this story. The Statesman did just that. The Statesman used the Chronicle numbers to just pull out the Texas administrators to see, in a very simple story, who made the most money. Well, it's Texas A&M president who makes $1.6 million. And then the chancellor of the A&M system makes $1.3 million. But it is interesting as you go down the list and you see that Texas State's chancellor makes more than the UT chancellor, the University of North Texas chancellor, and the presidents of a couple of universities. This is not a very pretty graphic and not a very pretty visual, and I think you could do a better job on that, but it's still very interesting to look at those numbers. So one of the things, if this interests you, in data journalism, that's what we do. We just look at the numbers and we make sense of them, and we learn how to do sophisticated visualizations. After we work in Excel, we work in Tableau to make those visualizations. We use open records laws and public data portals to get the numbers. And then, above all, we tell the stories of the numbers. The textbook for this course has got a lot of very useful resources to help you with those numbers and figuring out how you can make sense of them, and so that you can be accurate and don't make any of those mistakes that we sometimes see, one that I'll show you in just a minute. But check out the textbook and the chapter, and it's broken down easily for you so you can see what sort of numbers that you've got to tackle. And this is what we don't want. We don't want you to be CNN and having a screenshot of what you did on air run in the British newspapers. So you can tell this is from Britain because they use the word maths instead of math. But someone at CNN is rubbish at maths. News channel adds up Scottish independence poll to 110%. This is pretty simple math, so no 110% polls for you. Look, if the dog can do math, we can do math. All right? Let's go do some math and get ready for the next part of this video lesson on using math in journalism.